All right, everyone, welcome. Good afternoon. Welcome to the final preliminary round of MWSBC. I'll be your chair for today. My name is Saron. Standing with me is Harvard as well as Roshan. On the government, we have MSSDU. On the opposition, we have Peace Break. On the motion, can someone read out the motion for the live stream?
This House believes that FIFA should remove Qatar as the host nation for the 2022 World Cup.
Excellent. Afiq has decided to aid us in using his debate keeper, is that correct? Okay. So, without further ado, let's invite the first speaker from side proposition.
Panel, let's look at the main principle of FIFA as a whole. It is the unity of people or uniting people through sports. But when you actually appoint Qatar, a certain nation which is not parallel towards its principles, there is no point, I tell you, in creating an agenda without fulfillment at all, isn't it? So two substantives I'm going to bring into my speech today. The first is the legitimacy of Qatar as the 2022 World Cup host and about how it denies the principles of FIFA as a whole. Secondly, upon how our policy would actually be the best interest to all stakeholders, right? So before that, let me characterize the motion. So how do you look at FIFA? So FIFA as a whole is an international body or a football association that takes first, it holds major international events across the globe. Secondly, it takes accountability, full accountability when atrocities actually occur, i.e. the 2014 World Cup, when 2018 World Cup, when the 2018 World Cup, when 17 workers in Russia actually died in the making of creating stadiums, the hospitalities of FIFA World Cup, right? But in this issue, in this scenario, we thought that FIFA is lucky to actually get compensation and to actually get released by this issue. But we question you from the side of government. How many more of these unjustified deaths are we willing to lose in the name of football entertainment, right? Next, how are we going to characterize Qatar, or how are we going to remove Qatar as the 2022 World Cup host? Easy. We're going to make a revote and actually select a new host, which is more stable, does not provide atrocities towards the World Cup facilities as a whole. Why is it so? Because FIFA itself should remove that mediocrity which has existed these days when they actually appoint Saudi Arabia as when they actually appoint Qatar as the World Cup host, and they should actually hold responsibility to football fans worldwide across the globe. So the stance from our side is simple. Without that boycotting Qatar, we actually provide justice, we actually make justice take its place. Secondly, on how we will avoid further atrocities. Moving on to the first argument. Upon the legitimacy of Qatar as a 2022 World Cup host, let's look at the problems that exist in Qatar which denies FIFA's principles. First is its corruption. We can clearly see that Saudi Arabia is funding terrorists, ISIS. There's bribery happening in Qatar. They put $5 million they accepted a $5 million bribe to secure them as a World Cup host. All of this corruption, even with the promise of a corruption-free World Cup in Qatar. Secondly is the imponderable weather which they want to coexist, right? So the temperatures there reach up to 124 degrees, which is very not suitable for sporting events. Even the last issue of the tennis competition of WTA, when temperatures reached this high, a few people, the tournament itself was denied, was abolished as a whole. So their method of solving is to create a non-existent cooling technology, right? Which is non-existent these days because it has no scientific feasibility. So if you want to create certain technology which is existent, we should tell you that you should make it in a certain feature which is scientifically feasible, which is not the case. So the other alternative is to actually postpone the event to winter, which would actually trouble the scenarios. Why is this so? Because you will have Euro League fans which actually will go to this league because they think it's more important than national affairs. Secondly, you have NFL fans, which is very contradictory. So when you have these three tournaments with people who like the same sport, who actually be fans of the same idea, you have less people actually going to this event, right? Third, on the big workforce that exists there. So in status quo, 1.2 thousand workers have already died through first, the migrant worker exploitation. Second, these people actually died without legal protection and no recompense from to their families. So this is is a morally wrong principle for Qatar to impose. But for that, any POIs?
Sir, your speech only consists of things that have been happening in status quo. Explain to me how, like, banning them from entering this World Cup will actually solve any of those problems.
Sir, when you actually ban a certain country from certain facilities, such as the World Cup, you provide this idea or this ideology that okay, FIFA actually banned me from assigning a World Cup, being a World Cup host. Why is this so? Because I have corruption, I have impounded weather, I have a big workforce. All of the issues that I create, I actually puts realization into it, and from this I would actually solve the issue and try to fix it properly. And at the end of the day, I would maybe think, okay, next time I can get the play or get the spot. Fourth is their restricted foreign laws. What they actually impose is that they have no alcohol tolerance. They would not invite gays. So they also have a broken justice system. So a certain issue, a foreigner was actually prosecuted for an accusation of rape with no reconciliations. Inviting foreigners to this place is not safe for foreigners, for FIFA fans as well. Fifth is the monetary burdens. So do you seriously think, ladies and gentlemen, that it is economically and logistically possible to create a whole new city for $270 billion in just to propose an event which is lasting for 4 weeks? So assigning Qatar would actually be like assigning Qatar as a World Cup host would actually be like running a political campaign with the vanity of beauty pageants, where world leaders will actually come to attend the festivities depending on crises at the moment. So when an assignment of a World Cup host is perpetuated to a country which is not stable and propagates inferiority, it will lead to a World Cup which would actually deny the utilitarian principle and would not be at peace, and is actually denying the FIFA principle as well. Secondly, upon how our policy will actually be the best interest to all states. So FIFA, first, its credibility would be intensified. Why is it so? Because when you fulfill the duty of denying a world-class competition with corruption, favoritism, and scandals for fans, you're actually fulfilling a principle. So to Qatar as a whole, how is it beneficial to Qatar? So when you perpetuate realization to change, when you actually ban them, you make them notice that there is something wrong with their nation, that they cannot host the World Cup. You actually come to the realization that they have a problem. So what will happen here, the corruption in Qatar would be fixed, their faulty justice system would be fixed, their weak workforce would slowly have an organic change because they realize that they have a problem. So without that change itself is exclusive to our side, to our policy. So how is it better for the football fans worldwide? So when you actually ban this country, which is like at war, you actually create a better World Cup which does not disturb other leagues, who actually have more fans coming. You will not risk of being a victim of faulty laws. You have foreigners actually being guarded here. You have no corruption. You have no imponderable weathers. You have no feeling of guilt sitting in a stadium which has led to a workforce genocide. So ladies and gentlemen, what have I explained to you for the past few minutes? I've explained to you that the Qatar itself is illegitimate for the World Cup as a World Cup host, because it denies all principles of FIFA. Secondly, is how our policy would be the best interest to all states. And with that, I rest the case.
All right. Can we have the first opposition?
When FIFA was there to appreciate football, we asked you to appreciate the football and the football itself. It was never something to be politicized, and it was never like part of the criteria for you. Like nothing, none of the parts they say actually go against why Qatar was like fitted into being the hosted nation in the first place, why they won the bid, and things like so. We tell you that FIFA in itself is there to immerse within cultures, and we want these cultures to be celebrated. And we want football to be celebrated for the fair play alone, instead of all of the allegations that they have falsely told us, right? So firstly, in my speech, what I'll be doing for you is simple. Number one, I shall be directly responding as to what the government has brought for today. Secondly, I shall explain to you three things. Number one, FIFA's true obligations. Secondly, why Qatar should host. And lastly, why all of the attention, the negative attention that is brought onto Qatar is actually an invalid reaction that we reject in today's debate. My second is going to come up here and talk about why removing Qatar is intrinsically bad and will harm the regions around it and things like so. All right. So before I go on to my to the case brought by side of opposition, let's firstly go on to rebuttals, right? One, FIFA is there to host events across the globe, as what Prime Minister has told us. Yeah, sure, we agree. But out of all 20 countries who have hosted the FIFA World Cup before, none of them has ever come from Middle Eastern countries, right? So we question to you, why can't we have it there as well? If FIFA is there to celebrate football as a devoted sport that is celebrated throughout the globe and things like so, why don't we include countries throughout the globe? All right. So and then they have never been explicit to you as to why Qatar does not possess the ability to host FIFA World Cup. All they've been telling you is literally two reasons why. Number one, temperatures, and secondly, the social barriers that Qatar has put its people. Right. As they have said before, and as has been said before, Qatar, all of these problems that they have brought forth in this debate are all solvable. It's not as though we can turn a blind eye or we think that these problems aren't solvable. If it's not solvable in the first place, then Qatar shouldn't even have been, be the hosting nation in the very first place. People wouldn't, they weren't supposed to be part of the countries that were bidded to become hosting nation and things like that, right? So there are issues onto corruption and all those political backlashes. We believe that all of these aren't confirmed yet. If it's confirmed, then that's another debate that we have to get involved in. These are all allegations, and we reject this the premise that they have brought to us for today, right? So as I've said before, all of their harms. No, thank you, sir. So as I've said before, all of their harms are solvable. Anything else about people dying in the process of building stadiums and all, those are all solvable through other alternatives like laws and so on and so forth, right? Okay, now let's go on to the case on underside of opposition. Number one, what is FIFA truly about? We tell you that the function of FIFA is that to promote culture, to immerse themselves within cultures, right? On how FIFA unites countries through the fair playness of football. So out of all the 20 countries that has hosted FIFA World Cup, none of them has ever come from the Middle Eastern countries, right? So football in itself is that to bring out happiness to its people. It unites people through this game, and people just come together, have a great time to celebrate their devotion and their likelihood towards football and things like that, right? So we tell you that FIFA in itself should only be focused onto the fair playness of football, instead of coercing you to think that Qatar is a country that supports terrorism, or they are the allegations that they have towards corruption and things like that. Because at the end of the day, FIFA is not a country who can control what a country necessarily supports. It can only say yes that you are a devoted country towards football, and you possess the ability to host the FIFA World Cup, and that should be enough. If any of the reasons that they have afterwards actually mattered in today's debate, then it would have been there, that it would have been part of the criteria as to what a hosting nation actually needed at the end of the day. No, thank you, sir. So why is it important for us to diversify the idea of FIFA World Cup? Why is it so important for us to hold it and host it in various countries and things like that? Number one, because it's what FIFA is all about, right? And secondly, it's trying to avoid Eurocentrism. And thirdly, it's to reach out to all these countries and their cultures. And lastly, on how football stays an internationally celebrated event that engages with the whole lot of people across the globe. Before I move on, sure.
6 Arab countries recently boycott Qatar. How is Qatar feasible to organize these games in the country?
Well, yeah, these countries boycott Qatar for all of the other political backlashes that they have because they don't like Qatar and things like that, right? It's not because Qatar does not possess the ability to host FIFA World Cup and things like that. We think that all of the reasons that they have to go against Qatar in the first place was all political instead of like something that will harm the players on the field or like because Qatar is not a safe nation and things like so. Secondly, the second thing I'm going to be talking about, why Qatar should host the FIFA World Cup. Well, there are politicians. Okay, I'm sorry. Winning the right to host FIFA World Cup is basically appreciating a country's devotion to football and things like that, right? We're recognizing their ability to host this thing. Well, Qatar in itself has redeeming values like as a country alone. For example, they are economically stable, they're peaceful generally, and they're not a terrorist infested country as what like some other countries were before, right? So why exactly Qatar should host is that it passed all of the process and the criteria needed for them to actually become the hosting nation. If like they didn't pass all of those, then sure, we can tell them or clearly state out that Qatar did not deserve to in the first place, right? So like we, as I said before, we reject any other characterizations that tells us like because of the corruptions and all of the allegations that they have went through because it hasn't been confirmed yet. Thank you. So like, okay, as I said before, Qatar is economically stable, it's a safe country, and it's peaceful by nature. So if Qatar is a country who supports terrorists and like all of the other things that they have claimed, number one, we tell you that that's not necessarily true, but secondly, FIFA is not a body to regulate how exactly a country should work. All right, FIFA is only there for the football, so we should as well stay there for the football. We have to concede that one way or another, FIFA will have to be hosted in a Middle East country. And as of now, Qatar is like the perfect country for us to host it in compared to other countries which are like facing much more problems and things like that, right? So like we are telling you that that Qatar is currently like the perfect candidate as of now. But last thing I'm going to be telling you is what all of the attention that Qatar is getting is actually something that is invalid, right? Number one, because of politics, as I said before. But secondly, we question them. The things that Qatar is facing right now is much similar to what other countries has been facing before. For example, when Italy had the fascist issue back in 1930 something, and when Argentina had the junta rule issue, and also Brazil, which like so many people died, and the cause that they had to face, and also the indigenous tribes that they had to wipe out in order for them to build all of these hotels and stadiums and things like so. So Qatar, compared to all of these other countries, are more redeeming as a country compared to like all of the other problems that they have faced. So we question again why exactly and the attention is solely based on Qatar, because as far as they have said, Qatar still does not, the values that Qatar possesses as a country to host the nation, to host the FIFA World Cup, has not yet been diluted at the end of the day. So on the other side of the case, we are proud to oppose.
Okay, thank you. Can you make sure we keep the time? Yeah. All right. Can we have the second opposition speaker? Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we do concede to the fact that FIFA would want to unite the world through football, because we know that football is a common synonym amongst everybody, and they understand football, and you want to unite people with football, right? But we don't think that organizing the 2022 FIFA World Cup in Qatar would do such a good or much being a huge benefit towards society, right? Especially FIFA, because we think that it is disproportionate towards FIFA's principle of uniting the world, especially when you host it in countries which fund or allegedly fund ISIS or terrorist groups as a whole. We think that it's really problematic for opposition to argue that you want to organize or you want to unite the people, especially in these countries which promotes war or which promotes terrorism, which is disproportionate and is only misleading towards one another. Let's argue and let's fight certain points that side of opposition like of whole. First, they argue how they would want to promote culture despite all the issues and atrocities that happens within Qatar itself. We will tell you that Qatar, number one, is not only feasible to its characteristics that through climate and also like its human rights policy. But we think that FIFA itself should never take advantage over Qatar because of its rich or because of its wealth, right? We think that FIFA themselves should also consider certain political aspects in those countries, especially when they are allegedly funding groups like ISIS or terrorist groups out there. We think that Qatar should never organize, or FIFA should never consider Qatar as a country which would want to unite the world, especially when 6 Arab countries we are living side by side would condemn these nations like that. We don't think that unity can happen if countries in their region as well would condemn these games like that. We don't think that anyhow you would promote anything. We think that it's only counterintuitive. Second, how they argue that their politics should never be considered and you should only consider the sportsmanship of the game. We think that politics should also be considered, because when people come to their countries, they don't only watch football, but they also consider certain aspects of social aspects of those countries and how the people or labor works happen there, ladies and gentlemen. We don't think that they could simply accept the fact that Qatar funds an ISIS group. They couldn't simply accept the fact that Qatar burdens individuals for their own sake of building stadiums in the first place. Right? We think that it's disproportionate for you to incentivize unity when a country discriminates it as a whole. We see bodies like those Amnesty International condemning these sorts of hosting in these countries because they know that they aren't capable or they aren't feasible to host these games in these countries to its characteristics as a whole. But lastly, let's contest on certain argumentations, right? They tell you that Qatar is the most qualified country in Saudi Arabia or in the Middle Eastern countries, right? We'll tell you elsewhere. We'll tell you Qatar or other alternatives is there for you to host the games, right? We don't think that Qatar, despite it being rich, it should only host the games based on its wealth, right? We think that aspects of like climate and also like certain politics that happens in those countries should also be considered. Despite knowing that other countries have their own issues, we think that other countries, despite being poor, they should also be given the opportunity to unite the world, especially in terms of like hosting the games or whatnot. Now let's move on to like the second or third substantive from side of proposition. Right? First, how is Qatar unfeasible to host these games? Let's look at the current issue of how Arab countries are condemning these sorts of instances. Right? They send letters to FIFA to remove Qatar as the host because they think that FIFA themselves, Qatar themselves, fund these terrorist groups. They actually remove Qatar in these occasions through the Article 85 of the FIFA Code, right? How they think that in cases of emergency where they want to remove Qatar as the host, they think that it is more justified for you to do so because they know that FIFA themselves, through its principles of upholding integrity, credibility, and responsibility, it's not justified for Qatar to do so. On the second level, we think that the World Cup should also exist in other countries, right? If Qatar were to be questioned, we think that other countries like Russia should also be questioned in doing the work, fulfilling their World Cup, right, ladies and gentlemen. We think that in these instances, politics should also be considered. We think that all these elements that makes up a country should be considered when hosting the games itself. We know that in countries like Qatar, Bangladeshis, Indians, and also Nepals are being subjected to forced labor. This is directly disproportionate towards upholding unity because you discriminate these individuals because you think that they come from a poor country or from like a country which has a mass population. You would condemn them. You would force them to do certain things. We think that that's disproportionate towards uniting the people. We think that other forms of unity can happen better in other countries. We have countries like Australia being capable enough to organize these games, but because they lack of wealth, they lost the bid to Qatar. We don't think that that's supposed to be a good reason why Qatar should actually host the games. We think that Qatar themselves, through its politics that happens in their countries and through certain elemental aspects like climate and also labor or human rights policies in their country that happens is very problematic. Second argumentation. How we want to fulfill, or how is it directly disproportionate towards FIFA's principle? We think that FIFA's principle is to uphold unity within sportsmanship, right? We think that on side of proposition, we uphold it better. Why? Because we don't make countries like Qatar be compelled to actually host this game, despite knowing that their country has a lot of discrimination and also forcing labor and whatnot, right? We think that other countries are there. We think that FIFA can uphold their principle better in other countries. We think that Qatar shouldn't be the country that should host these games despite its background. But before that, yes.
If this chance really exists in FIFA, then why was Brazil allowed to host a tournament of World Cup?
We think that Brazil, through its past history of succeeding in the FIFA World Cup and having like 4 cups altogether, we think that FIFA can consider Brazil as a country which can organize the FIFA World Cup themselves through their experience of winning the World Cup themselves, right, gentlemen. We think that Qatar, because of the fact that they have never won a FIFA World Cup, or they aren't actually recognized like Germany, Argentina, so on and so forth, we think that itself raises questions among people because they think that FIFA is only a body which prioritizes wealth of a country but not elements of that country like politics and so on, right? But lastly, ladies and gentlemen, we think that FIFA themselves should never prioritize wealth. Why? Because FIFA is not a profitable body as a whole. They only would want to host games to unite the people. We think that it is disproportionate when you want to make Qatar the host of these games, especially in terms of uniting the people, right? Because when you want to unite the people, you can consider elements like climate change and everything, but we don't think you should consider politics, because politics is something that is huge. Politics is something that runs on an international basis. So what have propositions told you in this debate? Firstly, we think that it is disproportionate to FIFA's principle. We think that FIFA can do a much better job at hosting it in other countries. But secondly, we think that other countries are also like condemning Qatar and hosting these games. We think that it leads to a lot of problems, especially in terms of these Middle Eastern states, of condemning these individuals or condemning these countries. In a games of where you want to host unity, we think Qatar loses the debate. Thank you.
All right, can we please have the second opposition speaker?
Is this like live streaming?
Oh yeah. Does the third opposition speaker consent to the live stream? Some technical difficulties, we want to move the live stream in seconds. Just one, right.
My live stream.
All right. Thank you, active constructive speeches for this final preliminary round. Let's have the third opposition.
The ugly side of the beautiful game is an unfortunate truth. But sometimes you have to make trade-offs in order to pursue a long-term change, and going against some principles might be justifiable if that long-term change is a big impact, is a big enough impact, right? So government grounded their case in the form of fragmented arguments that are independent of each other. At one point, they wanted to say that it was unjustified because of pragmatic means and practical means of the temperature and like the social barriers of it. But on the other hand, you're also talking about the principle of FIFA, why it doesn't fit the principle of FIFA, and it's ultimately harmful when you promote a political narrative. My speech will be in the form of questions, and then I'm going to talk about why our case still stands, right? So let's talk about the biggest question that government failed to answer, right? Does this principle of FIFA not being able to be in line with these things really exist? Is the principle really how they portrayed it to be? So the yardstick of this, so what was the principle? Right? So the principle that we agreed on was that it promotes intersectionality, accepting other cultures, and being stances to begin with, right? So what was the yardstick? Their yardstick was if it promotes a political stance, then therefore it is not stanceless, and therefore it is not in line with FIFA's principle, right? But if that yardstick, because we believe that it's contradictory to the case for one reason. Taking an active decision to remove the rightful position of a country to host a tournament is, in a way, promoting a political stance, right? Because we believe that it's easier for political media to convince people that FIFA is promoting a stance against Qatar as opposed to nothing happening at all. So basically, we say that media is able to capitalize on the action of FIFA actively removing Qatar as opposed to nothing happening at all, right? So necessarily, the promotion of political stance from FIFA is better. It will happen better. It will happen worse in your world when media capitalizes on that actually happening, right? Because it's that precedence is exclusive and it can only happen in your world. In a world where this never happened before, then FIFA can be seen as a neutral stances in organizing that it needs to be. You need to feel that principle. So why would they always contradictory when I asked them the question why Brazil allowed post FIFA because they try to like the Muslim okay, so that you can so now they have to go to how national football is, right? So I feel that it's very it's very like ungrounded because a lot of World Cup lost their own game with. So this is one idea, the principle of FIFA, underlying and stuff like that. Right? So second, why is it would their promotion of this anti-human rights abuses narrative really work, right? Two responses. Number one, by just removing Qatari's position to host doesn't really say much. We believe that in a world where FIFA removes this position, people have different interpretations as to what this might mean. So necessarily when FIFA just removes the promotion, some people may use other reasons as temperature or social barriers as the reason as to why they remove Qatar. Not necessarily human rights abuses and not necessarily all the harm that they wanted to propagate. Because of this, that benefit that they wanted to promote, that is political narratives being spread out towards people, is very unlikely, right? Because we believe Qatar will always use their own justifications as to why they were removed. We believe that Qatar will never concede into doing these things as what they are doing now, because we believe they have a reputation to protect. But secondly, they are debating in a world where FIFA actively prints articles condemning Qatar to begin with. Because if their benefit was to materialize, they have to concede that FIFA has to actively condemn Qatar, actively write articles as to why human rights abuses are stopping them from making them host. We believe that in that world, it is more apparent that FIFA now has a political stance against Qatar. FIFA now has a stance in politics, and we believe that it is fundamentally bad because FIFA is supposed to be stances to begin with. Before I move on, any points of the thoughts?
If Qatar were to be a place where discrimination were to happen, how would FIFA actually not condemn these instances that happen in Qatar? If Qatar were to be a place where discrimination happens, why wouldn't FIFA condemn these actions that happen in a place where it poses?
Because it's not the role of FIFA to do so, right? Because the principle of FIFA is to promote unity and intersectionality regardless of political stance. And a lot of these reasons as to why countries want Qatar to be ousted from hosting is based on political grounds. The allegations of funding terrorism, the allegations of supporting Muslim Brotherhood is mostly political, and it's mostly centered around Middle Eastern conflicts. Like the reason why the only countries who support their case is the 6 countries who are against Qatar, who had a blockade against Qatar, right? Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and all those countries. You believe it's not inclusive of every person, every country in the world, and to debate in those grounds is very unjust. So what they didn't want to respond in our world, right? So we told you that diversification in FIFA can happen better in our world. That there's diversification in exposure, right? For so long, wait. Oh, okay. So they also had this weird idea of there is an incentive in Qatar to change their policies and stuff like that, right? So we told you that they never really proved why FIFA is such an entrenched value in Qatar that they will suddenly have to act upon the removal of them to host these tournaments, because we believe Qatar's elites won't listen to FIFA anyway, because we believe that they are richer than FIFA to begin with. But secondly, we believe that in the comparative here is that when people actively go to Qatar, when they become the host, people have an accommodation in Qatar, they get to talk to the people of Qatar, they get to humanize with the problems that actually exist. Because secondly, it's exclusive because the collective mass of people are going there. So you can't compare this to people just tourists just going to Qatar casually, because when they host a World Cup, a lot of people will go there and find hotels and start, celebrating in other parts of Qatar. When this happens collectively, it's more likely that people will capitalize on what they found in Qatar and humanize with all those things, as opposed to nothing happening at all. Thirdly, we thought that it's easier to vilify something that people see rather than just assuming something through the media itself. So let's talk about the diversity in FIFA and what happens better in our world. We told you that for so long, FIFA has been Eurocentric, right? Cameras, interviews, and appropriation of a host nation has always been centered around Europe and America, and never had been about the Middle East. We had no response from side of government. They kept pushing ambiguous principles as a trade-off as to why these shouldn't happen, right? Why is this harmful? Because FIFA continues to become a Eurocentric organization that doesn't really fulfill its purpose of being intersectional and unified, right? We believe in that sense, if you want to defend an arbitrary principle of FIFA, you also have to debate in the grounds of our case, where you have to make Middle Eastern countries host this tournament now, because in the advent that they don't, most likely people will vilify the Middle East and it will happen much worse. So the comparative here is that who promotes better narratives, right? We believe in our world, when we don't become anti-Qatar, when we allow people to humanize with the people of Qatar, the message is more clear. In your world, when you vilify a person, that doesn't really send a narrative because it's ambiguous and it doesn't really connect with people. Thank you.
All right, and to start the reply speeches, let's have the opposition reply.